Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 2nd regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. And for those of you that came in late, Councillor Powell is not having an organ transplant. This is something we picked up last week at the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Conference, and it's simply an advertisement. I promised I'd advertise for them, so if you haven't registered to be an organ donor, please think about doing so. First item on the agenda this evening is the minutes of the council meeting held September 18th. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The next item is the recommendation that the October 2nd council meeting agenda be approved. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Salter. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Thank you. All opposed? Thank you. That is carried. We have one delegation this evening, but it's quite a delegation, and it's the Vancouver Island University Community Park Master Plan folk. And I'm pleased to present Ms. Pam Shaw, who is here. And Pam, do you want to come up and introduce your fellow colleagues that have come with you? And I would ordinarily say you've got 10 minutes, but I'll be a little more generous tonight because you're the only delegation, and this is a very important report. We're looking forward to it. Please proceed. Turn the microphone on, press the button, and speak as closely as you can into the microphone. You'll have to lean over.
All right. Well, we've worked closely together for some months, so this will work for us. Thank you very much to Mayor and Council for inviting us to be here tonight. My name is Pam Shaw, and I'm the Director of the Community Planning Program at Vancouver Island University, as well as the Research Director of the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute. And I'm pleased to introduce my colleagues on this project. Lauren Shaw is here from MABRI, Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Region Research Institute, and Sarah Holden, who's working with MABRI as well and is also a student in her first year of the community planning program. So I'm happy that one of our planning students is involved in this project. I'd like to say, first of all, and I was just about to say thank you for having the guts to participate with Vancouver Island University. I think the better word is courage for it. That you would have the interest first in working with students. One of my colleagues will mention this later on, but we went through this afternoon and added up the number of students who are involved in this project, and it's just over 100. So we have students who are involved on a day-to-day basis as paid research assistants. We had many other students who came out to volunteer for specific activities, other ones who we paid an honorarium to do survey transcribing. So in a number of different ways, we've had this is more students than we've ever had involved in any project in the past. And I like to think that it's 100 students who will convocate from VIU, and someday they're sitting in an interview, and on their resume they say Community Parks Master Plan, and the person who's interviewing them will say, well, tell me about that. And they'll be telling the story of this parks plan and the risk that the City of Parksville took that worked out for you. It wasn't so risky. So say, but the risk to work with students on something that's very important to the city. So we started the contract in January 2017, and the mayor met with a group of students and signed that document so that we could move forward. And it's a document that replaces the previous plan for the community park.
Thanks. So we're just going to go over the highlights of the planning process, then lead into the top 8 recommendations that we have for the community park, and then go on to the short, medium, and long-term vision for the park. So from a student's perspective, this was just one of the best experiences that I've had in my educational experience. There were, as Pam said, there were over 100 students who were involved in this plan, and we really felt supported and engaged by the community and by staff, and I just want to thank you all for that opportunity.
So as far as the consultation process went for the Community Park Master Plan, we began in March with the Parks on the Street event occurring throughout Parksville, and then moved into our World Cafe event, as well as began our picnic table talks. And then beginning in April, we had more picnic table talks, and finally in May had our first youth engagement session at BYLAWS, as well as the start of the online resident survey that I hope you all contributed to. Picnic table talks were an ongoing factor throughout the project and continued throughout May as well. And then in June, we had our gazebo talks event in the community park, as well as ended the online resident survey with a total of 696 responses from members of the community. Our consultation continued throughout the summer with the tourist survey in July. In August and September, we began compiling all of the results into the Community Park Master Plan and continued with picnic table talks. We now find ourselves on October 2nd presenting to you, Mayor and Council, and with your direction, we will begin our next round of public consultation, and are hopeful for the eventual adoption of the plan in the future.
So the plan is based on 5 guiding principles which inform the recommendations for the plan. So the first is to celebrate the unique culture and heritage of Parksville community through the park. The second is to create a more accessible park for everyone. The third is to support sustainable infrastructure use and maintenance, and then to protect the natural environment and waterfront, and then finally to encourage fun and vibrant activities within the community park.
So what we'd like to address now is our top 8 priority recommendations for the community park. There are 60 recommendations in the plan, and we've chosen 8 of them as ones we wanted to highlight tonight. There may be other ones that the City of Parksville decides are easier to do, could be completed more quickly. That's certainly possible, but these are 8 that we wanted to highlight. A couple of them are a little controversial, so those are the later ones that I'll be presenting, so the students get the ones that are easier. I think that's fair. The first one's mine. This one's not controversial. Interesting, through both the resident survey and the tourist survey, people mentioned we'd be interested in learning more about the Nanos First Nation and Coast Salish nations that have been on this coast since time immemorial, looking at some kind of interpretive elements. And there's a wide range of possibilities. This is a recommendation that doesn't make any specific suggestions other than it's opening the door to a conversation with Qualcomm First Nations, Nanos First Nation, and see what how the nations would direct this conversation. That's what we feel is important, but interesting that it was an element that was mentioned by the majority of respondents in both surveys.
Okay, so this recommendation is to improve the accessibility throughout the park and to the waterfront. This is all about alternative transportation and universal infrastructure, really getting at the needs of the community and to access all parts of the park, and for all people of different levels of ability to do so. So if you have mobility issues, this is a really key, important factor for the community.
Our third recommendation is to develop a multi-use public square with a more formalized food services and seating area. This is a space that the community park currently doesn't really have, and it would offer a formalized food space for food trucks and vendors and any community events that would occur in that area into the future.
This one's mine. We are recommending that the City of Parksville consider a system of user fees to support infrastructure and maintenance in the park. Right now, infrastructure and maintenance is paid for through general revenue, and that's certainly a possibility that exists forever for Parksville, should that be the decision. But Many other municipalities have moved to systems of user fees where there is some kind of relationship between the asset management in the park and the users in the park. So organizations that are very heavy users of the park would pay some kind of fee to support that use. And there are so many ways to think about this. The first question that we had that came up in talking to city staff about this is what about nonprofit groups? What about groups that use the park and contribute back to other not-for-profit groups in the city of Parksville? What about groups that involve kids? And those are the kind of discussions Parksville will have to have. So we have many examples of user fees from other jurisdictions, but it's something that will have to be made in Parksville approach should Parksville wish to proceed down this path. But the issue is this is a park that's being loved to death, and it's a beautiful piece of land. People, residents and tourists both treasure the uses that are in the park, see some very careful expansion of some uses in the park, perhaps some uses that won't exist in the park anymore, because it is such a valuable space. That's why, and it's I guess trying to find a way not to love this incredible asset to death. Mine as well. Group. One of the issues that came up through the consultation is we would be talking to people in Parks on the Street Day or gazebo talks or other engagement events, and we'd say this event is about the community park, and people would say, what community park? We'd say, well, the big community park. And people would, the downtown waterfront park or the beachfront park. And so people had a collection of names for the community park, and one person said at the World Cafe, well, aren't all Parksville's parks community parks? Well, true. That's true. That's accurate. And so the question was, could this be named? And I understand this would be a very big discussion. And is it a historic figure? Is it reference to local First Nations, an important name for the nations? Is it a natural feature? There's all kinds of ideas that might come up about the park, but it feels like it might be a time to consider proper noun name for the community park.
Okay, so this one is to redevelop the existing entrance and then also the road within the community park. Currently there's some traffic congestion issues, so being able to create a looped road system would really help to mitigate those. And then creating better entrances to the park also, I think, creates more of a connection between the downtown of Parksville and the park, and really removing some of that perceptual barriers that I think some citizens were concerned with.
The curlers who use the curling rink in the community park were an active part of all the consultations that we had on the park. One of the issues that has been identified is that the curling rink is in need of some fairly substantial repairs. And so we are recommending, as part of this plan, is to work with the curlers and the regional district to start the investigation of a new site for the curling rink. So the curling rink, once a new site was built, Wembley Mall has been mentioned as a possibility for a site that might make some sense with the context around the Wembley Mall site. Once that new facility would be built, a purpose-built facility with built to very high standards, potentially with some multi-use capabilities to it as well, then this curling rink would be demolished and the land could be used for other uses that are perhaps more appropriate to a waterfront community park. I'm going to add a recommendation that's not in the plan. My colleagues are looking at me with some trepidation. One of the recommendations we're not making is the expansion of pickleball in this plan, in the community park. And I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. Pickleball is a really, really big sport. There are so many people involved in it. It's a growing sport. I've been chatting with different colleagues in different municipalities about it. It's a sport that's expanding through the United States. There's people who are going to Mexico or warmer climates for winter are developing pickleball facilities in in new places that never existed before, even a couple years ago. And so in this plan, we're not making a recommendation to expand pickleball in the community park, but we are recommending that Parksville and the Regional District and Qualicum Beach needs to take a very serious look at the expansion of pickleball facilities in the Mid-Island area, because the sport is growing by leaps and bounds. It's exactly the kind of activity you hope people will engage in, and there needs to be better facilities for the pickleballers. But again, not in the waterfront park. It could be in other places in the Mid-Island area.
So this recommendation is not suggesting a formalized path system, but rather a contextual way to show visitors how to get from Community Park to another jewel in the Parksville area. This could be represented in simple interpretive signage, or like Shemanis has done with the yellow footprints on the sidewalks. So it could be sand dollars for Parksville, or really just any contextual tie between the two different park areas.
Great. So these visions are for things that we believe could be implemented in the short term at lower costs to the city. And some of these include changing the names of the name of the community park, establishing better crosswalks throughout the park so that people feel safer when they're crossing, say, to use the bathroom facilities, providing signage, educational signage throughout the park, including signage that acknowledges the traditional territory of the Coast Salish First Nations.
For the medium-term actions for the community park, it encompasses the plan for 5 to 10 years in the future. 3 highlights from the medium-term actions are to renovate the skateboard park, expand the use of the gazebo to a year-round performance space, and develop accessible beach and water access for any mobility challenge patrons.
And then moving along to long-term actions for the community park. So these are the ones that would take likely more than 10 years to complete. We're talking about a small permanent washroom facility at the end of Beachfront Drive, changing the road to one-way to connect the northernmost end of Beachfront Drive through the existing gravel parking lot, upgrading the existing washroom facility because it is under such a rate of use that will be the time when it does need to be repaired and replaced, to pave a portion of the gravel parking lot nearest to the curling rink as it stands today, and construct additional facilities near the picnic area shelter for park maintenance, public washrooms, and storage. Let's say on behalf of my colleagues and for the more than 100 students at VIU that were involved in this project, we'd like to say thank you to Mayor, to Council, to all of you who came out to the events, to City staff, Deb, Warren, and John, and the many, many hours they spent reviewing drafts with students and answering questions, many more than I believe they ever expected they would invest into the project, and to the community of Parksville for the time they spent and the consideration they gave to students as the students completed their work. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I've had I've taken the time to read the report. I'm delighted that you've talked about a 5, 10, and 20-year plan, because there's lots of things to do, and it's going to take, there's no doubt about it, it's going to take time. So on that note, I have more to say, but I'll say it at the end. I'm going to ask my councillors if they have any comments or questions for the delegation. Okay, Councillor Salter, Councillor Beal, and then Councillor Burden. Sorry, I almost forgot your name.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to thank you for your presentation. You've done a lot of work here for sure. It's a very well put together report. I noticed, though, that what looks to me to be really important to tourists and residents is the washrooms in the park. It seems to be pretty high up on the list of wants. So we just completed some washrooms in the park. So those are not adequate?
Through the Mayor, our understanding from the engineering department and from research in other places is the level of use is at such a rate from an asset management perspective It's both, it's perhaps are they sufficient for today, but it's more they're wearing out very quickly is the issue. So it's to decentralize the washroom facilities into a couple other places in the park, and then in a park that had a lower level of use, facilities that might last for 20 years, you're looking more at a 10-year lifespan.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to plug what I saw at FCM again, which was washrooms that cleaned themselves at night. So I think those are awesome, and they're not really expensive. So, you know, we could add a few more of self-cleaning washrooms, even with showers in them, for less than $100,000 a piece. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Salter. Councillor Beal.
Thank you. I noticed that Mr. Figuera got his pen out there, so that's great. I primarily wanted to thank you for all the work. I know that it's been really interesting. You know, I've certainly enjoyed the opportunity that I've had to sit in at and take part in the World Cafe, and also seeing you down at the beach in all kinds of weather. So that was neat. And also looking ahead at these longer range plans, if you've been down there recently, we actually, although it's not for driving on, it is nice to see that there actually is a gravel pathway now, so that from the after the work down at Arbutus Point, which is fantastic, what an improvement down there, and then to see that there is a path that goes along much like what you proposed in here. But thank you very much for all the work you've done, and certainly, and some of the things that you brought up, although they may seem to be a little bit more controversial, they actually are, some of those are things that we have discussed here around the council table previously. So they're not, those controversial ideas are not all new to the council.
Councillor Burton.
So I'd like to echo those thank yous and ask a question about maybe something that's a little closer to my heart that I don't see mentioned here very much. I noticed on the tourist surveys and on the resident surveys that some kind of a performance stage was fairly high up on the list, and I'm wondering if that is included in the development of a public square, or if it's buried somewhere.
Yeah, so I believe for a performance space, the gazebo would be expanded to allow for a year-round performance, and then as well, there's the integration of bleachers by the gazebo for viewers of any sort of performances, and then with the new performance space that has been proposed, it would involve some seating as well.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. And like everyone else around the table, I just wanted to echo my thanks. And it was a really comprehensive report. For those in the audience, it's 139 pages of just summary. So my question isn't actually towards you so much as to our CAO, is where does council go from here?
Well, we do have budget discussions coming up. If there are things that council would like us to address in the short term and going forward, there are a couple of avenues. You could ask staff to prepare a report on the areas that you would like to see work in. You could request us to include certain things in the budget coming forward. It's entirely up to you what kind of direction you would like to give us, but reports or budget discussions are two avenues.
Well, as I said, I read the report. I spent a lot of time looking at the proposals and the timelines and where and why and how, and I think that that's a good start. But there'll be more consultation, much more consultation with the public. Yes, go ahead, Ben.
To the Mayor, on October 28th is a public open house that we're holding on the plan. And because this is the first time the public has seen the draft of the plan as well, we'd be very interested in what people have to say and to provide us some direction on any of the recommendations.
What I did when I read the report, I kind of divided it up into a number of groups. And I must say that first off, I was impressed with the history of the First Nations history. who've been using the park for thousands of years. And the fact that it doesn't have a name, for me, in my way of looking at things, there may be something there that we can do in terms of looking for First Nations presence in Parksville. The other thing that struck me at the history of the report was the work that was done by our forefathers back in the 30s. I mean, they raised a lot of money to buy the land and then start developing it. And you know, when you talk about the dirty 30s, I wasn't around in the dirty 30s. I don't know, maybe Mr. Pastors was. I don't know. Were you around in the dirty 30s? Anyway, I'm just teasing. Anyway, the amount of money that was raised for that time was fairly substantial. You know, we're talking about almost $3,500, I think, in total. And I was quite impressed, and I'm adamant that we have to recognize the founding fathers that had the foresight to do that and to put restrictions on the use of the park. I thought that was a really good idea. You couldn't sell parts off. You couldn't let anybody use it. And then you sort of come into focus, and you've got the children, you've got the aspect of walking, you've got the aspect of accessibility, and I really like because we're working on it now, the accessibility to get to Rath River Beach. You know, we just came back from the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, and we met with the Minister of Lands and Forest, and we told him and his staff that we're looking at a walkway down at the base of Corfield on Nurbis Lane. We have a right-of-way there right to the Englishman River. And we suggested to him respectfully that they can start working on the Orange Bridge. With the sidewalk and the bridge itself, we'd have a connection to our resort way, and we'd have a connection down to walking, of course, or cycling down to Rath River Beach. So all in good time, and I firmly believe over the years that's certainly going to happen. But for me, reading the report, it covers all sorts of bases. We've got some challenges. We're going to have to look at, I think we're going to have to look seriously at fees, because it isn't going to be cheap, and we want to keep the efficiency of the park the way it is today in the future, and it takes a little bit of money to do that. And also the other challenge will be the curling club. From my role as city representative on the RDN, I know that the curling club is going to need a great deal of money, either to fix it up where it is now, or if there's a contemplation on moving it. And I know that the RDN are working on their sports facilities in terms of they're developing a master plan too. So it kind of all dovetails, but you know, there's no doubt about it. It is going to take 5, 10, and 20 years to get this completed. And I can't thank you enough. I think that this is going to be a really good base document to work from. And you know, we'll give credit to VIU where credit is due. So thank you, and thank your fellow students. And we're looking forward to October the 28th. Thank you.
Very much.
Thanks very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is an update on the Parksville Fire Department activities, including a summary of call volumes and incident statistics. We have Chief Marc Norris with us tonight. Chief Norris, welcome. And you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a summary of the last 2 quarters. I think the last time I was here was in March. And so I'll just go through it here. I hope you should all have a copy of it. So this slide is the summary of our calls to date. The yellow band at the bottom is 2017, so Q1 is the 106, and then you have totals for April, May, right through to September. So you can see that despite my feeling that we were going to be down from last year, we are actually up to date on our call volumes. A lot of that has to do with the wildfires in the interior, I think, and just vigilance of the public. And so many burning complaints were called in this year. We went out to many reports of fires, many fires out there. Had to deal with a lot of that sort of thing over the summer, fireworks complaints, those sorts of things. We're also up in medical calls and some of the other categories too. So training, committee meetings, and equipment maintenance, this is a summary of where we're at to date. You can see that we've done about 8,500 member hours to date to the end of September in training hours and meetings and those sorts of things. So quite a big total. Will probably be around 10,000 hours by the time the year is out. Fire prevention activities, we have 166 fire and life safety inspections completed, 22 public education events, that's 107 person hours, and 434 people contacted through those events. And we've done 8 fire cause investigations. Of note in fire prevention, we have 4 youths currently going through our youth fire setter program, and 3 of these are also involved in the restorative justice program. Now, we were also able to have a hazardous structure demolished with working with the owner at 413 Wembley Road, where we attended a fire. So a little bit on the membership, just a few pictures from throughout the year so far. We've graduated 5 from our 2016 recruit class on April the 3rd. 9 started in that class, so 4 didn't make it all the way through. 2017, we started 8 new members, and 1 has dropped out since then, so we're at 7 right now. Our current membership, the 3 paid staff, 1 administrative assistant, and 37 volunteers right now. 2 of those are currently on leave, so personnel total of about 35 on calls right now. We're beginning our recruiting drive, and we're still seeing pressures in terms of recruitment and retention. Like I said, 7 people have left the department so far this year, all for reasons of leaving the area for work, family changes. 1 got married and moved to the mainland, so all those sorts of issues. None of them because they didn't like the fire department. All because of too much time, not enough time with family or their businesses, those sorts of things. Availability of volunteer on-call members during the day is an issue for us right now. Most people at our call volumes, our current call volumes, are not able to leave their work several times a day or several times a week even. It's just too much of a detriment. Either their employer won't allow it or they just can't do it because they're self-employed, and it's too detrimental to their business. And then proximity of on-call members to the fire station. Seems our members are, most of our members are moving further and further away from the fire station as we move forward. So that has a impact on our response times as we go forward. Some of that has to do with availability of housing and where it's available and for how much and those sorts of things. So in terms of community events, just a sampling of some of the things we've been involved in this year. Canada Day, Kids Fest, we do the Kite Fest, we do the teddy bear drop for them every year. Kids Fest, we have a display down there. We sent our vintage fire truck down to Snana's Coast Nations for their Tribal Journeys event. And of course we had our 75th anniversary open house in Schoenstein on the 22nd of July, and that was a huge success. Councillor Beale, I believe, was the acting mayor that day, and came out and said a few words. It was a great event, and I know our members enjoyed themselves a lot. The food was good, and it was just really good. Lots of honorary members out that day, sharing their experiences and whatnot. In terms of operations, I just threw in a few incidents of note and a little bit on our extreme weather duty crew. Those are some of the incidents we went to this year. So of note, the bakery fires we had at the end of April, we had both the Sandcastle Bakery and the French Creek Bakery, fires in those two bakeries. Those are suspicious fires and still under investigation. Probably the first one was the wrong one. This was the structure on Wembley Road that I mentioned earlier. This particular house we responded to a fire in, and this is an example of a house that is considerably dangerous for firefighters. We don't, it was a small fire in the house that day, but that was set by youths. There was also drug paraphernalia in the house, and just an example of some of the hazards that are out there. That owner was great. He voluntarily removed the house, so in conjunction with the building department and some demolition permits, the owner removed that structure. Of course, on July the 6th, we had the Ocean Terrace apartment fire. Just a summary on that. This was a 4-story, 32-unit multi-residential structure, 3 floors built in the 60s and the 4th added in the 80s. 42 occupants in the building at the time of the fire. We had 57 firefighters from 6 fire departments in Parksville that evening. We performed 1 rescue off the 4th floor, and our emergency program was activated. So we had our emergency program coordinator. Actually, we had all 3 emergency program coordinators there, ours, Qualicum's, and the regional districts, as well as we deployed ESS. So, and that was successful from that standpoint in terms of giving some taking care of the immediate needs of the residents in that building. Quite a large fire. Quite a good effort by our fire crews to actually get that fire stopped where it was. And we couldn't have stopped it there without the help of our neighboring fire departments. So our mutual aid and automatic aid agreements were a big part of our success there. And just this is another one of note. This was a rescue on the French Creek rail trestle. We had 2 youths, 11 and 12-year-old girls, who had decided to traverse the trestle, and they got stuck up there. They couldn't go any further and weren't comfortable going back, so we used a combination of ground ladders and some rope rescue techniques to bring those folks down. So that trestle, if you haven't seen it, is it's about 100 feet tall at its highest. They were just over 30 or 40 feet up in there. So we had our extreme weather duty crew on for 38 days. There was 38 days of extreme fire rating throughout the summer. It was warm and dry again. Of course, there was a lot of focus on the wildfires because of what was going on in the interior. It was very, very dry here, and I think we were lucky that we didn't have more fires than we did, and we didn't have any more significant fires. So we averaged 1.75 members per day. You can see that 4 is our goal per shift with a minimum of 2, so we can't quite achieve that with the availability of our members. And 19 of those days were filled with recruit firefighters, which is a bit restrictive because they lack the training. They can't do all things, so they're a little bit restricted. These crews were taking care of burning complaints, posted fire ban signage around the area, especially where we were having issues, visited those trouble spots, pre-planned potential trouble spots, and performed some equipment maintenance. And so just a highlight on our sort of major projects that we're working on right now. The training tower structure, which is, that's a picture I took today of the footings in the training ground going in. And hopefully by the end of this month, excuse me, early in November, we'll have a tower there. Our aerial ladder replacement purchase, which is next on the agenda, and the hiring of the new Fire Rescue Services technician position are major goals through the end of this year. So upcoming for the fire department, we're back into the fall here, so we're training. We have Fire Prevention Week coming up, October 8th through 14th. Our open house is on Sunday the 15th. To celebrate that, the theme this year is every second counts, plan 2 ways out. So we're hoping that everybody will familiarize themselves with their fire escape plans at their house. And then our annual food drive is coming up November 18th and 19th, and our target this year is 10,000 kilograms of food and $10,000 in cash donations. And that's it.
Thanks very much. A very engaged fire department. Questions from members of council? Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Mark and Chief Norris. And I was just curious, you mentioned that a few fires are under investigation. Now, when there's an investigation, is that something that's carried out in-house, or is there a combination? I'm just curious about the personnel that's involved in conducting an investigation.
So there's 2 parts to the investigation. One is the fire cause investigation, which we are part of, and occasionally we work with insurers. We usually look at it first, and then we turn it over to insurers. So that's to determine what the cause of the fire was. And then there's the criminal side. So in those particular cases with the bakeries, those are under criminal investigation, which is the RCMP's jurisdiction.
Any other members of council questions for the fire chief? He's not going away. He's going to be staying here for another item. Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Your Worship, could we please have a motion to receive the verbal report?
Okay. Councillor Burton made the motion, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thanks again. And we know that we'll be hearing from you at budget time. There's challenges with over time. There's going to be challenges with getting and keeping firefighters. You alluded to that in your report. That's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I think the fire protection area itself is infilling, and both in the city and in our contract areas that surround the city. And we're certainly seeing pressures in terms of, as those call volumes rise, and also other factors that affect the availability of on-call members. We're going to have to certainly look at staff.
Okay, thank you. Don't go away, Chief Norris. The next item on the agenda, the first report, is the aerial ladder fire rescue apparatus replacement purchase. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations. Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beale. So, Chief Norris, please give us the background on this issue.
Thank you, Your Worship. As provided for in the City of Parksville Financial Plan 2016 and 17 capital budgets, the Parksville Volunteer Fire Department seeks to replace the 26-year-old aerial ladder apparatus, Ladder 49, which is currently in service. The current apparatus is well past the recommended 15 to 20-year replacement cycle. The new apparatus will improve the ability to maintain service delivery methods and maintain safety of fire crews, which utilize the apparatus on a regular basis. The current available funds identified in 2017 Fire Department capital budget are $1.4 million towards the replacement of the apparatus, and staff recommends acceptance of the proposal received for the purchase of a current year 32-meter, 105-foot rear mount SMEAL aerial ladder fire rescue apparatus on a Spartan chassis from SafeTech Emergency Vehicles Limited for service with the Parksville Fire Department as per the recommendations.
Thank you. Questions for Chief Norris? Mr. Burton. Councillor Burton.
Just a couple of quick ones. One, what are you doing with the other one, the old one?
We intend to, following the disposal guidelines for the City of Parksville, try to sell the truck.
And do you transfer some of the equipment over, or is it all going as a unit?
Some of the equipment will be transferred over. Some of it's outdated. We have a couple of old positive pressure fans, ladders, ground ladders, which are over 25 years old, which are reaching the end of their service life, those sorts of things. Just to note, the highest trade-in value offered for that truck was $12,500, and we believe we can do better than that ourselves.
And then I noted you took a middle range number. I didn't. There wasn't a lot in the report with regard to availability of servicing and those sorts of things. I'm assuming that's the reason that you didn't take the lowest bid.
That's one of the reasons we didn't take the lowest bid. The other reason is this particular apparatus, which was the second lowest bid, is very much compatible with the current apparatus we have in service. So from an operational standpoint, in terms of our members being able to operate the equipment, it's very similar to what we're currently running in terms of the aerial and also the truck cabs themselves. So all of those units are custom manufactured cabs, so they're all different. This one's the same as the ones we have.
Councillor Beale and then Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Worship. And I was just curious if there's a difference in height availability. You know, with the new ladder truck, is it able to go higher than the old one?
Through your worship, yeah, it is 30 feet. It goes 30 feet higher than the current truck that's in service.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just have a few questions. So are we looking at approximately 80 or 85,000 left over after you purchased the ladder for 1331708?
Correct. Yeah, it would be around $70,000.
Okay. And so, what do you plan on doing with that? So, when you're talking about wanting to keep that as part of your budget, how do you plan on spending those dollars?
With these purchases, oftentimes when we go to pre-construction meeting, there are slight changes in the specifications. So we're allowing for some flexibility there. So we might want to, for instance, we were looking at our cord reel configuration on our trucks for electrical cord reels. Changing that configuration. Also, in this case, we could raise the ladder up 3 inches and save $8,000. And we want to add what's called an ergonomic hose loader to the truck. So instead of top loading the hose, it comes out of the back of the truck. With those two things offset each other, but there's probably the difference of a couple $1,000s. So it's just to have the flexibility to do those things at the pre-construction meeting, because things always change a little bit. And then the other thing is to replace some of the aged equipment on the truck. So there are some hand lamps, and there are things like some positive pressure fans, and those types of equipment that we haven't done a full assessment on every piece of equipment on the truck yet. There's some older saws on the truck on that particular piece of apparatus. So we're not talking about, we're really not talking about that entire amount, but it does offer some flexibility in case something changes.
So thank you for that. And so how much do you anticipate then the cost of the upgrades that you want to do? What do you anticipate that? Because really what's happening is, yeah, we did approve the ladder, and so, but it's going to be a little bit less, so there's some money left over. But my question is, what do you anticipate do you think that you will need? And if you don't need the whole thing, what will you do with the additional amount? That's what I'm wondering, because it's 70.
I anticipate, the one thing I should have mentioned is on our previous two pieces of apparatus, we didn't include the mounting of equipment on the apparatus. So that's also a cost. So configuring shelves and all the little hooks and doodads that mount straps and those sorts of things that mount all the equipment into the truck and hold them in their specific place. So that's also an expense that is tough to tell exactly until you get the truck in front of you and you can actually do it. So I should have added that. I don't anticipate it to be more than $40,000 or $50,000. I don't have an exact number, though.
Okay.
It's not our intention to spend all of it, just...
So what would you do with the additional? You just keep that aside for things you would need throughout the year then, sort of a budget? Is that what you're thinking?
No, it would just return to general revenue.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. And so you would have an itemized list and what the costs were and so on, and whatever's left you just return back?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
We would be able to provide the, after pre-construction meeting, we'd be able to provide the exact price of the truck itself, and then mounting would happen when the truck was delivered. Yep.
Thank you.
If I were me, I'd buy a drone, but I'm not. Don't mind me. I'm drone crazy. That's another story. Okay. Any further questions for Chief Norris? Seeing none, we have a mover and a seconder. I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Chief Norris. Now, this is the next item is a report to be received. It was discussed at UBCM, and I'm looking forward to Mr. Butterworth's presentation. I need a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Burden. Mr. Butterworth, please give us the background on the elimination of the council tax-free remuneration. I guess it's because we earn too much money.
Thank you, Your Worship. The council's remuneration is currently 2/3 taxable stipend and a 1/3 non-taxable expense allowance. In the 2017 federal budget, they proposed to eliminate the non-taxable status of the expense allowance starting in 2019. At this point, it's just a proposal, but if it does go through, then that's what they'll be doing. This change, if it does go through, will have an impact on the net amount that council receives after taxes, as it will increase the CPP and income tax amounts owing on the stipend. Several options have been discussed in the council report. These include increasing the stipend in 2019 so that council's net pay remains approximately the same as it would under the old tax rules. Another option is for the city to supply council with the equipment needed to fulfill their positions, including provision of computers and cell phones to reflect the elimination of the expense allowance. Currently, at this point, councillors provide their own phones and their own computers, which the 1/3 non-taxable expense allowance is supposed to compensate them for. So, and the recommendations as per the agenda.
Just before I call for the vote, at Union of British Columbia Municipalities, there was a motion made that this not be to the federal government, this not be done. I might point out that the MPs are not being touched by this. The MPs aren't affected. Members of Parliament, isn't that interesting? So, anyway, my personal take on it before I call the vote is that I don't mind being paid babysitter wages for what we do. And I don't mind that at all, but I would mind reducing my babysitter wages over time. So on that note, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor that the report be received? Thank you. That is carried. So we haven't heard the last of this, and I know that our colleagues at the RDN have also made a motion that this not proceed. I think it's going to be accompanied by a letter to the provincial and federal governments. The other thing on that, one last note, because it bothers me somewhat, one last note is that it would increase greatly the paperwork. If, as in your report, if councillors and the mayor started having to fill out expense accounts for travel and all this other good stuff, it would never end. So I don't know why they've done that, but let's hope they don't end up doing it. Thank you. Next item. And this is the grant and aid program, grant and aid applications. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Do I have one? Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Salter. Councillor Patterson, will you please give us the background on these issues regarding the 2017 fall grant and aid applications?
Thank you, Worship. Recently we had 6 organizations that applied for the fall intake as a grant and aid, and I met with Councillor Salter and we looked at allocating from the 2017 grant and aids budget. This is the 2 intakes. We do one in the spring and one in the fall of $2,500 each.
Any questions before? Councillor Burton.
So were these the only applications that were received, these 6 organizations, or was there others that were refused?
These are the 6.
Okay. And did any of them ask for more money than is being allocated?
Absolutely. It was just under $6,500 that was asked for.
Is there a chance we could see more detail on the application?
I would be prepared to refer it back to Councillor Salter and myself if you have questions, and to defer it at this time.
Can we change I guess we have to defeat the motion first before we can change it, or what? I'd like to see it deferred back, and I would like to see some of the detail, I guess, on some of the applications.
Okay, what we can do is, if council would like to table it, and then we can provide additional details to the councillors, and then when we bring it back to council, to the next council meeting, you will have had the opportunity to review that information, and then you can lift it off the table and decide if you want to amend it in any way, or defeat it, or approve it, or whatever it is you want to do with it.
Okay, so I'd like to move the table.
Thank you. Well, it'll be tabled. Oh, Councillor Salter seconded it. All those in favor of tabling? That passes. Thank you. Okay, this evening we have 3 bylaws for 3 readings. However, I understand that Councillor Burden wishes to introduce an amendment to Development Application Procedures Bylaw number 1538. As a result of this, I will now introduce only the first 2 bylaws, number 1515.2 and 1524.1, for the 3 readings at this time. I need a mover and a seconder to do that. Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Burden. Any questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Okay, so I don't want to get confused here. I will now introduce Development Application Procedures Bylaw number 1538 for council discussion. Councillor Burden. I have a seconder for that, seconded by Councillor Salter. You just want to speak to it? Councillor Burden, go ahead.
You know, we are continually faced with the issue of housing and housing shortages, and I'm always looking for ways where we can increase the availability of houses. We did have a variance request recently where an accessory building was being converted to a carriage house, and I think it was a matter of inches with regard to the setback. And it just seems to me that this is one more tool that we can use to encourage possibly other people who have an accessory building that could be converted to a carriage house, including we're still including some public input from the immediate neighbors, but it saves the city some money and saves the applicants some money by reducing the notification from the 50 meters to the 5 meters, and hopefully it will spur somebody to take a look in their backyard and maybe create some more housing.
Any questions for Councillor Burden? If not, Councillor Salter, Councillor Beale, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't know this was coming, so I'm still trying to just process. So the only change you are suggesting is that the number of properties or neighboring residents that need to be notified. There would still be a variance permit, et cetera. So 5 meters, and may I ask of perhaps of Mr. Russell, when it says 5 meters of the subject property, that is then from each boundary. It doesn't mean where the proposed, let's say, change is?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Beale, that is correct, from the property boundary.
And follow-up, thank you. And when it was at the 50 meters, would this include, let's say, facing properties that would be facing across the road?
If I may, Your Worship, road right-of-ways are typically 18 to 20 meters, so that would be correct.
So now that if this goes ahead, then anyone directly opposite the particular property would no longer be notified. Is that correct?
If I may, Your Worship, that is correct.
So, on the amendment made by Councillor Burden, I'm going to call for the vote. I have a mover and a seconder, do I not? Yes, I do. Okay. So I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. We have 3 bylaws for third reading this evening. We have 3, but I count...
Your Worship?
I count 5.
Sorry. We now need to give third reading to that bylaw as amended.
Did I miss
3
one?
readings. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I did. I need a mover and a seconder that Development Application Procedures Bylaw 2017-1538 be read 3 times. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Burden. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. So on my page, I've got 3 bylaws for third reading, and yet I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So why am I confused, Mrs. Gomez?
It's 5 actual bylaws, but it's third reading of 5 bylaws.
All right. 3 bylaws, third reading of 5. All right. You have them all in front of you. I'm going to ask to do them all together. I need a mover, Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Salter. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Do I have to do the next one on the next page? I'm going to read it then before I get a mover and a seconder. The Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2017-2005. No? We don't have to read them all out? No, I wasn't. Okay, just then. I'll go to the final adoption then. All right, thank you. 1 bylaw for final adoption, which is Park Dedication Bylaw 2017, number 1537. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Salter. Any comments, questions, concerns? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. I'm going to lead off tonight, Council, if you don't mind. I'll be very short on under new business. I want to announce that the official opening of the Coombs to Parksville Rail Trail and RDN 50th anniversary celebration. We're hosting a community event to celebrate the RDN 50th anniversary and that 50th anniversary of the opening of the 7-kilometer long Parksville Rail Trail to Coombs. Everyone's welcome. It starts, I believe, at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. on October the 14th. That's correct. And then I'm going to apologize for an omission that I made. My mother used to say the worst kinds of sins are the sins of omission. So I omitted to thank Mrs. Comas for the work that she did on the acquisition of the Ermineskin land. She was designated as our leader on this, and she negotiated with the representatives of Ermineskin Band, and I didn't mention it because she wasn't here. So out of sight, out of mind, and I apologize. A very quick comment from me. I know my fellow colleagues are going to want to talk about this a little more, but a very quick comment from me on the Union of British Columbia Municipalities. I've been to a lot of them. I think this is one of the best ones I'd ever been to. Unfortunately, we couldn't meet with all of the ministers we wanted to meet with, but we'll be doing that after the Union of British Columbia Municipalities Conference, which is probably a good thing because we'll get more time. The guest speaker was Terry Milewski, who was, everybody's seen Terry Milewski on CBC and other channels over the years. And his basic message was, don't trust, get your facts, and get your facts from reliable sources. And when his daughter, he said he never uses Facebook until his daughter told him, you've got a page on Facebook. So he looked it up, and then he had to get on Facebook to straighten things out. But the comments were very refreshing, because we're into fake news and we're into all kinds of things that are going on with our friends south of the border. And he made it very, very clear. Get your facts and deal with the facts. Don't deal with fake news or alternative news. I think he used that term. Very, very good speaker, and I enjoyed it very much. The other thing that I was interviewed on radio twice with regards to marijuana. And that was a hot topic. It was the first topic of the day on the first day on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. And I can tell you that this provincial government is wanting to be consulted. We'll be working on providing a response. The response is due at the end of this month, 1st of November. So we're going to have to get together, Council. We're probably going to have more questions than we have suggestions. One of the suggestions I made when I was being interviewed is, for me, the most important thing regarding marijuana legislation was the quality control, product and quality control. As a father and a grandfather, I don't want to see any Tom, Dick, or Harry selling marijuana, whether it's medical or non-medical marijuana. It's got to be product controlled. But there's a lot of other things that fall into line, and I won't bother going over that now. So on that note, I'm going to go around the table, and I'm going to start off with Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the last week or so, I attended the Oceanside Development and Construction Association meeting, and it was really quite interesting. They have a guest speaker that's coming forward next month, and I'm sorry I forgot my notes. But if you're interested in hearing some of the new regulations and in development and construction that is occurring in the province, that is what their speaker will be chatting on. And so it was really quite interesting. Mayor Westbrook from Qualicum Beach chatted a little bit about their ongoing OCP process and that as well. So very engaging and ongoing. As we've been through one recently, again, they're getting quite a bit of conversation and community engagement in that. I want to express some of my, I'll say the word, displeasure that in the last week we've had quite a bit of tagging and vandalism occurred while you were away at UBCM. There was over 10 vehicles that had spray painted or fences, and that in a 2-block radius. So it comes just after we had our staff sergeant's report, so it's a little frustrating. In addition, we do have great youth, and I don't know if it was youth or not, but we have some really amazing youth that are going to be taking part in a United Nations type conference in Victoria. So I think that's just awesome. And that we have people that are, young people that are interested in that as well. And I attended for one of the other councillors a brief discussion with the Parksville Community and Conference Centre, and they'll be presenting their budget soon with ours. And so I think that's pretty much
When will that be again?
I don't know the date. That'll be towards staff. That'll get slated in with our meeting agendas.
Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of items. First of all, I would like to say that it was a very, very busy week at UBCM, starting at approximately 7:30 in the morning and going until late in the afternoon and then beyond. I certainly attended a lot of different sessions, and there were resolutions as well as the meetings with 3 ministers and their staff. The one that I wanted to share was one that our mayor also referred to, which was the cannabis regulation, which will be coming up in 2018. And yes, that the province of BC really does will provide is providing opportunity for people to have input, and this is not strictly from, let's say, a council perspective, but citizens in the province. So it is open until November 1st, so let's say before November 1st. So from now until the end of October, people can have an opportunity to let the province know what they feel about a number of items. And I will read from this. The BC government's goals are protecting young people, making health and safety a priority, keeping criminals out of cannabis, and keeping our roads safe. And they're asking for everyone's thoughts on topics like minimum age, personal possession limits, public consumption, drug-impaired driving, personal cultivation and distribution and retail models. And all of these were discussed in sessions at the UBCM with quite a variety of opinions and thoughts about the different distribution and retail models. And all of these changes will require careful thought to ensure the right balance is struck for moving forward. So people can submit their feedback online, and if it is at engage.government.bc.ca, but I just Googled legalize cannabis BC, and it led me to a website where I would be able to get involved. So I encourage everyone to have a look at this and get as informed as possible, because it will have an impact in our community, and it will have far-reaching effects, and it'd be nice to make the best of it. Closer to home, I attended yesterday, which was National Seniors Day. I attended an absolutely fantastic exhibition of art that was produced by seniors in our community and in the larger community, sponsored by the OCAC, which is the Oceanside Community Arts Council. And the exhibit is on at the Community and Conference Center right next door until October 12th. The full exhibit is on, and then those that are hanging on the wall will remain for longer. I encourage everyone to go over and have a look. It is just fantastic. The youngest artist was 74, and the eldest 101. And many of these had not had any sort of art classes before, prior, or they had not had a paintbrush and supplies in many, many years. So wonderful program. It was really an absolute delight. And again, I encourage everyone to go and have a look. And some things are worth waiting for. So you'll have an opportunity, I hope, to get involved. It was great.
Just before I move to Councillor Salter, I was reminded I was asked to sit on a CBC radio panel on Wednesday at 12:30, and there was the City of Vancouver, the City of Nanaimo, and the City of Parksville. And when the moderator came to me and said, well, we hear that the City of Parksville didn't allow or shut down any pot shops that tried to open, I said, yes, they wouldn't file for a business license, and working with the RCMP, we shut them down. And so she turned to the City of Vancouver councillor and she said, I guess you didn't have the same situation. He said, no, when we got to 100 pot shops, people began to complain. And so now they're stuck with some really serious legal problems trying to shut these down. Thank you for waiting. Councillor Salter, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, I just prior to attending UBCM, I had attended a workshop in Nanaimo. I can't remember the name of it, but it's someone, they're going around the country talking about addiction and what happened, how folks who had gotten into addiction and again how they got out of it. And something that really struck home for me was, and I think it's probably not news to us, but that really what got them all out of addiction was stable housing. So if there's a basic at the bottom of that pyramid of needs, it's stable housing. And from there, they're able to get the services they need, but at least they have that one bit of stability in their lives. And so a place where they can always call home for at least as long as they choose. So that was really something that struck home for me, because I know that, it isn't just Parksville, but I mean, across Canada, people are struggling with, how do we do this? What do we do? But it seems that stable housing seems to be the very basic, or the basis of moving someone out of addiction. And of course, there's other needs as well, but that's number one. I also did attend UBCM, and I was really pleased to hear our Premier, John Horgan, talk about the modular housing, that they have put a lot of money, and I can't remember what it was, 600,000 or somewhere around there. And one thing that he did put out to all of us, all of the attendees, was if you have land, we have modular housing. And I really like the sound of that. So I hope that we will consider that. I hope that we'll consider looking into it and see if we can get some of those houses here, because those are stable permanent homes for folks, and again, to help move things forward. So I thought that was a really, really huge step forward. He also mentioned adding more facilities for folks who want to, overcome addiction, which at this time, anyone wanting to overcome addiction, first of all, they have to put their hand up. Then there's generally a 2-week, 3-week wait, maybe more. Then they have to go into a recovery, and then they get into their facilities. So these things can take so long that while you're waiting, you kind of give up. So they're saying that they're putting more. I think they said 6 in the Lower Mainland alone. So I think that's huge, and I think it's hopefully going to make a difference for all of us here. So I just see some bright spots and some hope in the future for all municipalities and regional districts. I also attended a water sustainability discussion at UBCM. They were talking about the new legislation and so on. Water management it was an interesting discussion, and there were a lot of good questions that came out of that. I'm also completing my Master Gardener's course down at the Parksville Museum, and I've learned some really good stuff around pesticides, herbicides, plastics, etc. So expect to hear more about that here at this table in the future. And yeah, so that's it for me. Just basically that I feel that this year attending the UBCM, I feel a whole lot more hope coming back than I have so far. So I think we got some good news there.
And as I'm listening to my fellow councillors speak, I wanted to tell everybody that we met with the Minister of Lands and Forests, we met with the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction, and we met with the Minister of Health. And I can tell you that everybody participated. I know that Councillor Salter and Councillor Powell had a lot to say when we sat down with Minister Darcy. That was very worthwhile. The Minister of Lands and Forests, Mrs. Comas and I talked about the Rath River Greenway and what we want to do there, and we'll be coming to them for some right-of-ways to the Englishman River from the base of Corfield Street. And the Minister of Health, of course, we invited the town of Qualicum Beach and the RDN in the person of Bill Veenhoff, because it's a doctor's shortage problem on Oceanside is an Oceanside problem, and we wanted to imprint that on the minister that this just isn't a Parksville problem, it's an all Oceanside problem. So we all got a chance to say our piece, and we left them with recommendations regarding nurse practitioners and others. So thank you for reminding me as this goes along. Councillor Burden, I hope I didn't step on your toes.
No, not at all. This is my very first attendance at the UBCM. I found it really interesting. I enjoyed the guest speaker, Terry Maliski. He was both entertaining and informative. I did attend several of the workshops. One in particular, Parcel Map BC, and what I came away with, we do it better. I use the Parksville map, which shows utilities and the various lots and services in our community on a regular basis, and what they were showing me from Parcel Map BC, which has taken thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop, doesn't really compare to the system that we have here, so way to go, Parksville. I attended workshops on short-term rentals and their impact on the rental accommodation, with some solutions from several communities, including Penticton, the regional district of the Okanagan, Similkameen, Tofino, and Whistler. Attended lots of marijuana was just dominated the whole conference, and I guess we've got some work to do here, but I could have used a little less marijuana while I was there. It was a good conference. Came away with a lot of good information. Had an opportunity to meet with folks that I knew from my other walk of life in various communities around BC, and overall it was a very enjoyable experience and very informative.